Are we doing well? Thank you very much. So without further ado, over to you, Professor Stein.
Thank you, Thank you so much, Pooley. So my research is on the music of Bernard Soglinsog Woma. And so I'd like to just welcome all of you to my PhD lecture recital. Thank you, friends from Education Africa, for coming out, friends from Unisa. I want to say that I've had so much support from Thomas, from Marc on the work over the last few years, and also a lot of support over the last many years, 9 years now, from my friends at Education Africa, and also the rest of the faculty and staff here at Unisa. Thank you for supporting my work. So this is a practice-led study of composition in performance, focusing on the work of Bernard Soglinsog Woma. Bernard was my mentor, my collaborator, and one of my closest friends. For nearly 3 decades, we worked together. Bernard was a Gyil Goba, a master player of this instrument, the Gyil. And as a Gyil Goba, he was one of the most acclaimed musicians of his generation in Ghana. Sadly, he passed away in 2018 from cancer at the height of his career. And so thinking about going back to school to pursue a PhD, I realized I wanted to focus on his work as a way to pass it on to future generations. So just a little map of Ghana. Bernard is from the far upper west region of Ghana, all the way up here where the arrow is. That's where his village of Heneteng is. And Bernard is Dagra. The Dagra people are one of multiple ethnic groups that play the Gyil as their primary instrument. The Dagra people also live in a large part of Burkina Faso, in the southern part of Burkina Faso, and even into the north of Cote d'Ivoire. So this is where Bernard grew up, in a far rural area of Ghana, way up here. But in his 20s, he moved down to the urban capital of Accra, which is much like Joburg or Pretoria, bustling city with people from every part of Ghana. And he joined the Ghana National Dance Ensemble. As a member of the Ghana National Dance Ensemble, he learned about music from many other parts of the country, and he eventually became a master drummer in the ensemble. In fact, in Ghana, he's better known today as the player of the Royal Asante drums. People know him from playing for different visiting dignitaries, presidents from around the world. And yet the Gyil, of course, was his main instrument from the rural part of Ghana. And then also Bernard became a US resident and worked with many Americans like myself. He lived in his later years of his life about half of each year in the United States. And so in my research, I have interviewed 30 collaborators with Bernard, 10 from the far north, the rural part of Ghana where Bernard's roots are, 10 from the urban Accra area, and 10 Americans, each reflecting on different parts of Bernard's career and Bernard's practice. Also in Accra, Bernard formed the Dagra Music Center. So he formed a school in Ghana where he has actually taught thousands of people from around the world. And it's a center that still continues to thrive, being run by his widow and some of his good friends, as well as his nephew. And I was just there at the Dagra Music Center just last month. So the instrument that was Bernard's primary instrument and the focus of my research is the Gyil. And the Gyil is a very diverse instrument. There's many types of Gyil. And the picture you see here is a Dagar Gyil. This is the grand instrument. It's a huge instrument. Delta wouldn't let me bring this one on the airplane. In fact, very difficult to travel, but this is the main traditional instrument played by the Dagar people. The instrument to your left, over there, is what a Gyil looks like. So rather than 18 keys, we have 14 keys, and both of these instruments are tuned to a relatively equidistant pentatonic scale. But this instrument over here is actually a hybrid, and I found out in my research all the way up into Burkina Faso, this instrument is now called, by many people, the Bernard Woma Gyil. But what Bernard did was he took the big sound of the Dagra Gyil, took that big sound, And he made sure, even with the Gyil, still has that big sound, even though it is a smaller instrument that you can travel with. And another thing about this particular instrument that makes it very special, this is actually Bernard Woma's Gyil. We were very close, and when he passed away, I was honored that his family gave me this instrument. And the reason they gave it to me, he had two instruments. One was the traditional equidistant pentatonic tuning, and this is what the family called the orchestra Gyil, because this is the Gyil that's actually been played in South Africa before in Durban, when we played with the KZN Philharmonic. And this instrument we tuned to an A major pentatonic scale to facilitate collaborations with orchestras. And so just in this one instrument alone, you start to see the syncretic nature of Bernard's music, combining together the sound of the two traditional instruments and then tuning to a Western pitches to be able to facilitate intercultural collaboration. And so my primary research question is around syncretism in Bernard's music and how holistic practice manifests within composition and performance. Related questions I'm looking at include how are his compositions grounded in traditional Dagara genres, language, and spiritual practices. I'm looking at that question largely through IKS, Indigenous Knowledge Systems, or more specifically, Dagara knowledge systems. My second sub-question, how did Woma's experience performing music in new contexts and his expanded knowledge of broader global traditions inform his creative work? As Thomas mentioned, I'm using a 4E music cognition lens to look at this question and related areas. And finally, what remains consistent and what changes through improvisation within varied performances of the same composition? And this question, inspired by my American mentor, Ed Serif, looking through a contemporary improviser, composer, performer lens, something that Ed writes quite a bit about. But my South African advisors wisely told me to focus, even though I have this wide angle, to zoom in on a single piece. And I am so grateful that they gave me that advice. Because just looking at one piece of music, I'm really able to get a big picture of Bernard's music. And so I chose the piece that was Bernard's favorite piece and was a piece that many of us found to be really his seminal composition. And what makes it the perfect piece for this research is that it connects to Bernard's larger repertoire. He was quite a prolific composer, so it was somewhat difficult to choose one. But also its clear grounding within traditional Dagara genres, and the fact that this is a piece that we played with orchestras around the world, here in South Africa, also in Germany, and the United States. So the composition that's the focus of my research is Gyil, Yɛru. Gyil is the name of the instrument, and Yɛru means to speak. So the Gyil speaks. So I'd like to perform Gyil Yɛru for you, and this is the main piece that I'm studying. Yaga. So that's the piece. Writing a whole thesis focused on this piece. But as I said, going and looking at this music in many different ways. So I've taken what's known in the US as integral theory. It's also sometimes it's closely related to transdisciplinarity. And I've used something called integral methodological pluralism, which just means that I'm looking at Bernard's practice from many different lenses. And so I spend a whole chapter focusing on Bernard's description of his own practice, through his narrative, through recordings I have of him, fortunately, talking about his tradition, through concerts he gave. And that's been a lot of fun, listening to all these recordings, my teacher, and doing narrative inquiry to look into it. And that is the subject of Bernard from the first person, or I. And then we turn to we, all of us as collaborators, the 30 people I interviewed. And this is looking at Bernard's practice through the voice of 30 different collaborators, the we, or the intersubjective. And then I look at the piece that I just played for you, and I analyze it using structural musical analysis, drawing on the work of one of my Ghanaian professors, Willie Anku, amongst many other African musicology, African music theorists, to analyze this piece. And so the piece is the object of my work, or it. But what I want to share with you today is maybe the most challenging chapter, which is the its, which is the genre systems, all the many different things that informed this piece, right? So obviously, in any type of music, our work is informed by the musical culture that we're part of. And Bernard, in fact, was part of 3 very distinct music cultures, as I outlined, growing up in the rural north of Ghana, working throughout his adult life in the urban capital of Accra, and then also collaborating with people around the world. And so that's what I want to present today, is the interobjective, looking at genre systems. So what we're looking at is ways of listening and ways of playing the Gyil. And so what I did is I took this piece, and I took 3 versions of it, and I played it for all 30 people. And I just asked them, what do you hear? What do you hear? And it was amazing the things they heard. It's kind of like a collective analysis, and it's been a lot of fun. These are also my friends that I've known for many years. And it's been a lot of fun to reflect on the music of our teacher through these 3 versions. The first version is a solo version, Bernard playing it by himself, similar to what I just shared with you. The second version is a trio version, which is me supporting Bernard on the Gyil, and then Kofi Ami playing the drum. And the third version is with a symphony orchestra. In this case, it was the Albany Symphony in New York. And so I'm going to share some of that with you. But first, this is a picture of me standing at my late teacher, Bernard Soglinsog Woma's grave in the north of Ghana, in his home village of Hinitane. I'm standing next to his brother, Dept of Woma, and next to Dept is Jerome Bassa, who during the interviews I did in Dagra, he was main translator. And speaking in Dagra, Dept of Woma really summarizes what this work was all about. Reading the English translation to you, he has passed his work on. It's his voice that we are still listening to right now. He has worked for the benefit of humankind, including his father's house. Everyone should take the work of his hand and continue with it and listen. So this was listening together with 30 different people. So I'm just going to play you short excerpts of each of the 3 versions, not obviously the whole thing, that would take an entire hour, but just short excerpts. And I'll let you read some of my research participants' responses as you listen. So this is the Piiru. Piiru is like the warming up of the instrument, kind of a free playing. This is the opening of Gyil, Bernard playing by himself. listened together. There were a lot of fun surprises. So Aaron Bebe, who's a Gyil professor at the University of Ghana, and Raleigh Oyiriyele, who's one of the senior Gyil players I interviewed, along with a number of Gyil players, immediately responded, "Low Gyil. He's playing low Gyil." And they heard that. And I'll get to what the low Gyil is in a second. David Rogers was the person who did the arrangement of Bernard's piece for Symphony Orchestra. And he reflects on Piiru, thinking about how Bernard brought this instrument to the stage. Kofi Amiao, who's the drummer in our trio, talks also about Bernard's stage presence and the sense of joy he always had when he played, his sense of humor. And so, low Gyil. I've been playing Gyil for 3 decades, and I had never played low Gyil. So this is good that I did this listening together, because I wasn't going to hear low Gyil. And so my friends heard low Gyil. And so let me tell you what the low Gyil is. The low Gyil is this instrument. And there's several different types of low Gyil. The low Gyil of the Dagra, again, the Dagra, like the instrument, is very big. This instrument I have here was made by this man, Tijan Irwana, who's Beerdefour. This is the Beerdefour style, and the Beerdefour is a little bit smaller. This is Gambara. You skip this key. See here, it's not an equidistant pentatonic scale. It actually has varying intervals. Now, also important is that in talking to my research participants, they said that this instrument is the ancestral Gyil, that this is the older version. And they have a story they tell about the origin of the Gyil, that it comes from the Katomble. Katomble is a mystical being, and the Katomble gave the Dagra, the Beerdefour, this instrument. But the part of the story, I had heard this story for many years, the part of the story I hadn't paid attention to before was that they didn't give them that Gyil, the co-Gyil. It was the low Gyil, or the bow Gyil. And also, it wasn't a Gyil with gourds on it. Now, if you go to a funeral or a recreational event in Ghana, the first instrument I played is 100% what you're going to see, okay? The Gyil that has the gourds underneath, the buzzing sound. The only time I've ever seen a panpo is in someone's house, like in Tijan's house here. You see he's dug a hole. This mic seems really hot, Chris. Let me turn down the mic. He's dug a hole in the ground, okay? And they put some grass on each side of the hole in the ground, and then they lay the keys over the hole in the ground. And that is the original Gyil. So when the Katombe gave them the Gyil, it was a panpo. It didn't have the gourd set. That developed later. And the panpo is still used as a teaching instrument. And so I've created a new version of the panpo. I made this box before coming to South Africa. My friend Tijan actually just made this instrument for me recently. And so with Tijan and with Jerome, I asked them, okay, Bernard is playing music based on this instrument that I don't play. I need to learn to play it. I'm a musician, I want to understand what's going on. And so Jerome taught me this piece that is called Bagr-Bine. Bar is their traditional religion, so this is the music that's played at the religious festival. Bagr-Bine, and I'm going to play the panpo low Gyil. Thank you. Okay, so continuing with the listening together. After the Piiru, the first song in Bernard's Gyil composition, getting back to the first thing I played, is called Naamwin. It's a song he wrote for himself, meaning Naamwin, the creator, has sent me. The creator has sent him to play the Gyil. That's what the song is about. Naamwin. So I'll play a little bit of this excerpt, and you can read some of my research participants' responses from when they listen. Gyil might go by himself, says Sakamu. Sakamu translates roughly to traditions. He's hearing immediately in Bernard's music very roots of the Dagara tradition. And he says it's Lobri music. Perpetual Womble, a singer and dancer, describes what Lobri music is. This, when someone dies, is the music we first play. And she also noted that the second song after this Bernard wrote for his mom, that Bernard switched between Lobri styles, playing the male style for himself and then playing the female style for his mom. Jerome Balsab also talks about Lobri music. In fact, most of the Dagara people I interviewed, Gyil players, dancers, singers, they heard this funeral music played on the low Gyil in Bernard's playing. Conductor David Geyer and composer Derek Bermel, like myself, not knowing about Lobri music, are responding to other things, the visceral nature of Bernard's playing, the trickster character that he brought into his playing. And of course, there's a wide range, this is just a sampling of the responses. And so here I am, just a year ago, I'm in the far north of Ghana, right on the border of Burkina Faso, in fact, at Jerome Balsab's family home. His farm actually goes right to the border of Burkina Faso with two master Gyil players, Mariere Maratomi and Zem Fakang. And with these guys, I learned to play some Lobri music to, again, understand where my mentor Bernard's music tradition is coming from. So I'll play a little bit of Lobri. I'll start with the male style, as Bernard does in his composition, and then I'll switch to the female style.
All right, so continuing on with our listening, I already told you that the next song in Gyil Yɛru is called Yuor, which translates ideal woman. And Bernard wrote this song for his mother. And this is now, I'm changing versions on you as we go, but this is now the concerto version. So you'll hear symphony orchestra behind this. So just to give you a sample of Yuor with orchestra, Kofi Amiao, the drummer in the recording, and Derek Bermel, my American composer friend, who didn't arrange the piece, but he was the main person that was connecting us with orchestras. Derek was the music director of the American Composers Orchestra, one of the top orchestras in New York for many years. So he was kind of a driving force behind this project. They both comment on the joys and also some of the challenges that we can have in these intercultural collaborations. And importantly, Aaron Bebe from the University of Ghana, Alex Woma, Bernard's nephew, something that only players in Accra and some Americans who have studied with Lobri would hear, is they heard a very clear connection between Bernard's playing and the playing of his predecessor, the very famous Gyil player, Lobri, who took the Gyil all around the world to Japan. And he was actually the Gyil player who was brought by Kwabena Nketia to the University of Ghana soon after independence to teach Gyil. At the university, he was the first Gyil player in the Ghana dance ensemble. And so he was asked to play these Gyil solos. So when Bernard followed him to Accra, and was for the very first time, mind you, asked to play Gyil by himself, as the dancers were changing their costumes, he was like, okay, what do I do? So he looked to a model. And the model he had was the great Lobri. Kakraba became a mentor to him, and of course, he also brings some of Kakraba playing into his style of playing. And so we see that in staging the Gyil, Bernard drew on the work of his predecessor, Lobri. He gained a lot of experience working with the National Dance Company, as well as traveling the world. And so I'd like to play for you now Bernard's very first solo Gyil composition. I'll move back to his instrument. This is entitled Nifaa Bie. And the reason I want to share this piece is it is very much in the style of his predecessor, the late Lobri. something I was actually aware of, the influence of Kpikpala on his music, but this was something that was really brought out by the multi-ethnic groups of people I interviewed in the south of Ghana, people that had collaborated with, that said, yes, absolutely, Bernard needed a model. He had never played solo Gyil before. And Kpikpala, as well as his younger brother, who made these instruments, Tijan Berwana, who also preceded him in the company, provided a very good model for him. One last example for you guys to listen to. This is the final composition in the piece. And this idea of composition and performance is that the piece was always evolving. And in fact, this was only added at the very end before we did the concerto. But again, listen to the ending of the concerto version, and you can read the responses by some of my collaborators. All right, so you can again read some of the responses in this piece. Aaron Bebe from the University of Ghana clearly heard another traditional composition entitled Ghanaian. Jerome Balsab heard that Bernard is borrowing from the music of a neighboring ethnic group, the Piiru people. Andrew Woma, who is the dancer and Bernard's brother, responds to how this music reflects Bernard's given Dagara name, Soglinsog. His middle name, Bernard Soglinsog Woma, literally means in the middle. Bernard, as Andrew says, was in the middle of everything. He was taking Dagara songs, putting them with beautiful rhythms, and then putting them into the middle of the symphony orchestra. And the conductor of the orchestra, someone who really got into this music a lot, David Dyer, reflects on many levels. And my favorite thing is he talks about the grand level being these kind of intercultural relationships. It's about making friendships and how we can show through these collaborations truly the oneness of humanity. And there are many challenges along the way, but it's a joy to bring these two traditions together. And it helps to be able to work with a really good conductor who decided to wear the traditional batakari from the podium, by the way. So, two more words for you. Sogonu, Bernard's middle name, to be in the middle. The syncretic nature of his music. He really was in the middle of so many things, drawing on Dagara tradition, while bringing many other Ghanaian traditions into his music, collaborating with jazz musicians, collaborating with orchestras. And then the other word, this is something that came out a lot from people in Accra, as well as Americans like myself who have also studied some Bearder music, that Bernard was borrowing a lot from another neighboring tradition, the music of the Bearder. And so when I was in Ghana just a month ago, I asked Tijan Berwana, who made this instrument for me, to teach me some Bearder music. This is Kotumbiliwe and Ghanaian, the song that Aaron heard in this last composition. And Kotumbiliwe is about the mystical being that gave them this instrument. Kotumbiliwe. So what did I learn from this? As we listened together with 30 different people, 3 different versions of the same piece of music, actually I gained a lot from it. I feel like I've grown as a performer, I've grown as a scholar, as a teacher, but in a nutshell, I looked at this along 4 different research lines, including spirituality, which we find moving throughout, community, language, which includes both Dagra, but also related languages, and of course the language of the Gyil itself, and then the Gyil. And as I went from the 10 people in the upper west region of Ghana, where the instrument comes from, I found a Dagra-centered way of hearing this music, which then moves to Accra as we start to take in other elements, the theatrical elements, to a more Ghana-centered way of hearing Bernard's music. And then finally, as I went to the United States, and in America, I also did interview a couple of Dagra who now live in the United States. We see a more kind of world-centered way of understanding his music. But what I love is that in all these ways, people really appreciate what Bernard brought to his art form. And so this is one of the bigger takeaways. And the singer, Perpetual Womble, thought really summed up our work very nicely in Dagra, which I've had translated to English. Some child did not grow up to meet him, but because we are still reviving his memories this way, when she grows up, she will see traditions that have been maintained from the past. Aha! Someone can grow up, but never get the chance to meet him. But if we keep reviving his memories this way, they will never die. It is maintained as a wonderful thing. It is his name, and his name is also held in high esteem. Yes, and his memories remain with us. Yes, and he continues to live within us. And that's been a beautiful part of this journey, just to share this music with 10 South Africans, a dozen South Africans here today who came to this PhD recital to get to share Bernard's music. And there's very few of us actually playing this music right now. His nephew, myself, a couple other people. And so I'm hoping through this work I will be able to, as Perpetua says, pass this on through recordings to the next generation. I was actually sitting with my other advisor earlier this morning, Marc Duby, and I felt really good because he said one of the things he's gained from reading my writing is that he really wishes he had have met Bernard. And I feel like if I've made him wish that, I've actually accomplished something. So that is not actually Perpetua that I'm standing with there. That is Bernard's widow, Rita Woma, who continues to run the Dagra Music Center, doing a great job. And Rita, I think I can sum up my presentation with a quote from his widow. The soul is still in the house, and that is Bernard's ancestral home in Hinitang. And I feel that whenever I play his music, even though Bernard passed away in 2018, at any time I play his music, he's still with me. Anytime I get to share it with someone else. And that's really the magical thing about this. And so I'd like to end, not with just this quote, but by playing a very special piece. The last time I was with Bernard was in 2017, before he passed away. And we were up in the north of Ghana, and I did the Gyil Goba initiation. He had asked me to do that. I knew he had cancer and didn't have long to live, so when he asked me to do that, of course, I went to Ghana. And he kept playing the same piece of music over and over again, called Pataasi. I hadn't actually heard it before. And finally I said, Bernard, why do you keep playing this piece over and over as we're driving? You know, you're driving for hours in the car with the same, and he's just playing the same song. Okay, he was making a point. He said, oh yes, Mark, I wanted to play this for you over and over because I want you to arrange this as our next concerto. And so, unfortunately, that did not happen. But the night he died, I felt so emotional and I couldn't sleep. I got up, I turned on that recording, and just like I want to do with my work, that we can pass on his music through recordings, this last piece I actually did not learn from Bernard directly, but I learned after he passed away through the recording. And this is entitled Pataasi. Thank you so much, friends, for coming out. You guys have been just a wonderful audience.